Hey guys, I'm really excited to introduce my next guest. He is a master caricature artist, painter, and illustrator. He studied at the Watts Atelier and then he later taught there for about 10 years. He won the Golden Nosey, which is the Caricature Artist of the Year in the International Society of Caricature Artists in 2005. He then went on to be named a Master Caricature Artist of the Year in 2010. He collaborates often with Stan Prokopinko and teaches courses on Proko. He's currently doing live streaming on his YouTube channel, which will be in the description below. So you can check that out. He does that every Sunday. And really too many awards and accomplishments to list in the field of fine art illustration, fine art caricature. So I hope you enjoy the interview with Court Jones. I met you a couple of years ago. Actually, no, I met you at the first convention, the ISCA convention in Arizona, I think is where I first met you.
Yeah, okay.
And we talked and stuff, but I didn't really get to know your story or your background or anything, not much of it. So I always like to start the podcast with kind of like a little background information or how you got into art, or if there were like any decisive moments where you kind of knew that you wanted to follow this path.
Yeah, I always had a drive to be an artist from a real young age. That's the only thing I ever really did well when I was really young. I think, I always tell people that when I was in maybe first grade, they asked you what you want to be when you grow up, and you could write it in a paper and draw a picture of it. And I said, I think I wanted to be a stunt hang gliding pilot. and I drew a picture of a person on a hang glider, but of course I drew it out. So obviously I was more of an artist than a thrill-seeking hang glider. So yeah, I mean, people would always ask me to draw pictures for them, even in elementary school. And the first time people really actually wanted and demanded my art was like in 4th or 5th grade. I always drew pictures of Michael Jackson, like little portraits, because I really liked Michael Jackson at the time. And so
story's a little different now, or are you still like Michael Jackson?
I like older music, so yeah. The music is all I really care about with Michael Jackson. I don't like to get into the other stuff.
Yeah.
But it was so popular that I ended up getting just Xerox copies made of a Michael Jackson drawing, and I just handed them out to people when they asked for an original drawing. I didn't think about charging them for it, because basically I was making prints of my artwork and didn't really.
This is 4th grade.
Yeah.
4th grade?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's funny. So that's.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, and then I realized I stuck with art, and it was the one thing people always gave me good, positive feedback on. So I stuck with it. My parents told me I was good at it, so I kept doing it more. So I took advanced art classes whenever they came up in junior high or high school, and I drew illustrations for the yearbooks and advertisements for the school plays, and that's sort of my first thing where people actually. I was art directed and had a job to do. And of course, in school, you're not getting paid for it, but, it was like my first real jobs was, high school illustrations.
Huh. Yeah, that's really interesting. So did you have other jobs before or after, or did you just automatically know that you wanted to do that?
Yeah, it was always my calling, I think. Of course, in junior high, I did get into theater. I did a lot of plays, school plays, and a lot of people thought I would be more of an actor, and I'm like, well, I'm really more of an artist, but the acting thing was just more to, it was a fun thing to do, and I made friends, because I wasn't super outgoing and popular, but I got more popular in school through being in plays, so that was a nice little fun perk. Actually got invited to parties, but when you're an artist, you don't really socialize with people much, so I had the dual thing going on, acting and art, and I continued that into college, too. I went to a University of California school and majored in art and minored in theater. So I continued to do plays up through the end of college, but then I kind of didn't do it after that. But I've always had an interest in, I guess, being in front of the camera and in front of people. I guess I like performing.
Hmm. So you weren't really into like stage design or anything like that. You were more interested in the acting and the playing.
I did some stage design actually in college. I took some classes as part of my theater minor. I had to do set design and set construction. So I
Hmm.
learned welding. I learned what goes on backstage. I helped out with some of the productions as part of my classwork. And then while I was in college, so it's like the year or two after I got out of high school, I went back to high school to see my old friends, my younger friends, do some of their plays. And my old junior high school director was actually there, and we chatted. And she decided, she remembered me from when I was Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music in 8th grade. And she said, "Hey, you helped out with some of these set designs." I did help out with some of the set designs at the high school at the time too, because again, I had a lot of friends that were still there, and they asked me to come back. It was weird. I didn't want to leave high school, I guess, after high school. But she saw me doing it with sets, and she actually contracted me to be the set designer for all the junior high school productions for the next like 3 or 4 years.
Oh wow.
So I did actual set designs and construction and all that, and that was weird. It was the first thing actually in art that I think I was really paid for. I was doing those sets for my old junior high school teacher while I was still in college.
Yeah, I had a kind of a similar experience with the drawing thing. I remember for me it was the Tasmanian Devil. I was like real huge on that, and I remember someone like stole my drawing and tried to say that it was their drawing. So there were all of these things that were like happening with art that I realized that there was some value there, you know. And that was actually the first thing that I kind of got positive attention from my mom, actually, or like kind not positive attention, but like it was something that would like clearly impressed her more than everything else that I was doing. Um, so, but what about your like transition out of that? Like, what did you do right after that contract ended, or did you have another job in tangent or?
No, and I wouldn't call the set design job a real job or anything. I was working delivering pizzas all throughout college from my main work, but I was living at home, so I didn't have a lot of expenses. I lived with my mom. But right after graduation, I didn't really know what to do in art. I had this art degree and a theater minor, and I really actually didn't have very good drawing or painting skills at all because the college I went to was very modern and very avant-garde. They didn't really believe in teaching how to draw.
Which college was it in California?
Yeah, it was a UC school,
Oh.
UCSD. I learned a lot about art history there. I had to take a lot of art history classes, but most of the studio art classes were more about just cerebral matters, like thinking about your art, writing a thesis, defending your decisions.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'd bring in a painting, but then they'd ask you why you put that red there, and I didn't have a good answer. I was just like, because I don't know what I'm doing because you didn't tell me.
Yeah.
It was not a place to learn traditional art at all. It didn't give me any practical skills.
Same experience here. Yeah. I mean,
it's really unfortunate. It's the state of art education in America, at least in most of the 20th century, was like that. And luckily, the past 20 or 30 years, I think ateliers and private art schools run by individual artists have risen and provided a lot better education. So to answer your question, though, about right after college, I didn't know what to do, but I saw an ad in the paper for an artist at a local theme park. And I didn't know what kind of art it was at all. It could have been making letter brush art. It could have been face tattoos, or whatever, portraits. I had no idea. And I got there, and I called them. I think I called and set up an appointment, and it turned out it was for caricature. I thought, oh, you know what? I actually goofed around in high school doing caricatures. I actually made that a section of my I think this advanced art class, and they ask you to focus in a certain area for basically a focused portfolio project. And I, for some reason, chose caricature. I don't know why I did it. I didn't think everybody would be a caricature artist, but I did in high school my senior year. But this is like 4 or 5 years later now, and I have some experience with caricature, and so they hired me. I got almost no training. I had one night of training. I was hired with like 2 or 3 other guys because it was the off season, and they'd lost some people, at the end of the summer. And so they gave us one night of training and then threw us into the park. And I'd never drawn with just a marker before, and I was terrible, but I did make one sale my first day, and it felt really good. It felt like, oh, man, I'm a real artist. So, and that's kind of my career in caricatures got started right then and there.
So that was the only drawing you did that day?
Yeah, I was too scared to draw anybody. Like I kept on saying, "Oh, this my friend here will draw you." If
Oh, yeah, yeah.
If you want to. But finally, by the end of the day, I did a little girl came by with her dad, and I drew the little girl a little $8 black and white face sketch. And I'm like, man, that wasn't so bad. But I hated the job. I was so bad at it for like the first 6 months. Every day, I thought it was going to be my last day. I just
Oh, you thought you were going to get fired?
Either that or I was just going to quit because
Yeah.
I honestly hated the sales aspect of it. I hated chatting people up saying, hey, come on over, get a sketch. I hate that stuff. I hate people selling to me. I hate that kind of aggressive sales tactics. But you had to do that. I mean, the job sort of required it.
Yeah.
And there's some people that were better at it than others. And I was in the middle. I was not terrible at the salesmanship, but I was not the best for sure.
Yeah.
But after about 6 months, I did start to just fall into it and thinking, this actually isn't too stressful. I'm actually getting the hang of it. And then actually 6, 7, 8 months into it is when I first started. I think my manager at the time, Steve Fishwick, who managed all of us at the park,
Yeah.
he asked me if I wanted to do a gig with him. And it was like $65 an hour. And I'm like, what? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got my first gig within, the first year of working there, and I'm like, well, this is where the money's at, is gigs.
Yeah.
But I stayed working in the theme parks for a total of about 5 years, and I worked in a few different ones. For one summer, I worked in Denver at a theme park there, just because they needed an assistant manager, and they'd pay for my move, and I thought, I could live in Denver for half a year, and then I came back, and I would help out sometimes at Knott's Berry Farm or Legoland, and then we got the zoo the San Diego Zoo, by the time I was about to quit. And I worked at the zoo a little bit. So, yeah.
So that was basically your full-time job for how long?
Yes, from like 96 to 2001, I worked in the theme park system for Commons.
So what were you doing? Were you looking up a lot of stuff in your free time or bringing in books and studying? Because your caricatures now have kind of a classical, it looks like you're classically trained.
Thank you. Yeah, it was actually a couple years into my job at SeaWorld when I think it was at a house party at Steve Fishwick's house. He invited all the employees over, and he showed us this book by an artist named Sebastian Kruger. And I'm like, whoa, you can do this with caricature? I had no idea. And I'm like, this kind of revived my interest in getting into painting and doing caricature more seriously. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be the next Sebastian Kruger, but how do I do that? But I found out from people, again, other artists at the theme park, they were going to this little art school in North County, San Diego called the Watts Atelier, run by a guy named Jeff Watts. And that's where they were. And I saw the drawings in their sketchbook. They were like really good figure drawings. And I'm like, wow, they actually teach you how to do figure drawings in a school? I never experienced that. So it took me a couple years because it was $250 or $300 a course at the time. And it was a little pricey for me because I was earning maybe $300 a week at the theme parks. But I lived with roommates, and again, my expenses weren't too high. But I finally bit the bullet in 2001 and started taking classes at the Watts School. And I just took like one class at a time, then maybe 2 classes. And after about 2 years of attending classes there, just taking some basic painting and drawing classes, that Jeff noticed I did caricatures and asked me to do a guest teaching thing in one of his classes that he taught, where it was a features and facial expressions class, but traditionally the last class they always teach in that course, the last day they teach caricature. And he wasn't actually very experienced in caricature and knew I was, and knew I trained people at the theme parks at that point. So he said, hey, do you want to come do the lecture and demo? I'm like, yeah. And he liked what I did, so the very next semester he gave me my own class there. So from
Whoa, that's great! I didn't know that.
Yeah, just 2 years at the atelier, and I became a teacher there. But my traditional skills were still not very good. I was good at caricature, but I wasn't awesome at painting yet. So I continued my education. I basically traded my teacher's pay for more classes, and I'm like, yes, now I can take like 3 classes at a time. I can afford to do that. So it jump-started my ability to take more traditional. So I took inking, I took gouache painting, I took landscape painting, perspective, anatomy, color theory. I got all the classes in that I really wanted to do, and I was able to do that because every semester I would basically have a class. And eventually they asked me to teach the features and facial expressions class, so that was one of my normal classes I taught there. And then they said, anytime I think of a new class I want to teach, just propose it and I can teach it. So I taught like a portrait likeness class. I taught digital painting and illustration. I taught. I did like formal oil portrait painting for one semester there, right before I left. But then, yeah, I stopped around 2012, I think, teaching there. I just, for some reason, like people weren't enrolling in my class much. Maybe I taught everyone that was interested in caricature and they'd moved on. Yeah, so I stopped going there and teaching there around 2012. But by that point, I was starting to get pretty busy with gigs doing, especially digital live caricature events.
Did you
traveling a lot for those?
Did you move into, like, you have a couple of classes on schoolism, right?
Not schoolism,
no?
But one of the actual other students and eventually a teacher at the Watts Atelier was Stan Prokopenko. And so when he left the school, he started by just doing like an art blog, like an instruction blog. And then he started to make like a video or two, and then it got really popular, and he decided to build it up into a whole enterprise.
Yeah, he's got a whole thing going there. He's got like a whole art empire going on over there.
Yeah, he's really, really smart, and he really invests in the business. He's got a whole team of people working full time for him. He owns almost an entire office building floor now in San Diego, where he has a studio and recording areas and offices.
He's kind of become more of a business guy, right? I mean, he's not really making much art anymore. He's like managing the whole Proko thing, right?
Yeah, for a while he was doing fine art and commissions for people, but then, the Proko school got so time-consuming that's his full-time job. And the art he does basically is just for the courses when he builds a new course. He doesn't do that. But yeah, it's very time-intensive, even with his full staff. So he doesn't probably get to paint or draw as much as he likes, unfortunately. But yeah, in around 2013, about a year after I left the school, he asked if I'd be interested in doing a caricature course on Proko. I'm not sure if I asked him or he asked me. I think he asked me. But he and I had been chatting, and I was always telling him how much I admired his courses and his videos that he was doing. And it took me about 3 or 4 years of working on my caricature course online, because I did it just mostly at home in my own spare time. I sometimes went into the studio to record some segments, but yeah, it took me 3 or 4 years to get that course made, and that was too long.
That kind of leads me to another question, which is, it's about the personality of artists, and there's obviously this stereotype that artists are chaotic and crazy, and if I showed you my studio right now, you would see the slow explosion of mess that's accumulating. But that whole like tortured artist alone in the studio is obviously not a true stereotype most of the time. But there is something about you and Stan Prokopenko. You guys are like super organized, and you seem really well paced with the amount of work that you're doing, and you stay consistent with the stuff. Is there something, have you noticed that, or is there something different about you, or what is that? I'm curious. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I've learned a lot about professionalism and being more serious about art from just my exposure with Stan. I think has been a good influence on me as far as that goes. But naturally, I am a pretty neat and fastidious person. I don't love clutter, even though there is a lot of clutter on my place. And just off camera, there's where my clutter is. You can't see it.
Yeah, you got the pile. Okay.
But I do definitely try to keep things organized, and I'm always cleaning off my desk. And I realized if I don't have filing systems for contracts and jobs that are coming in, jobs that have been paid, spreadsheet to keep track of payments and all that, I would lose track of things, and I would miss stuff. I would forget clients' deadlines if I didn't have a system. So it's a practical consideration, and I don't have too much work that I can handle usually, but things do overlap, and sometimes I have a long deadline for something, so I figured out ways to, I got a bulletin board, a digital bulletin board on my desktop, which is a list of like jobs and tasks I have to do. Stan is a lot better than me though at organizing. He uses these apps that like schedule his days around. I forget what they're called. He talks about them in his Draftsman podcast.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty good podcast for artists.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I highly recommend that one. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
What is the method?
It's born out of necessity, I think.
The method is like it's like the squat. It's not the squat. It's like the scram. The scram method is what he
Scrum.
called it? Scrum.
Scrum.
Yeah. I don't know what that stands for, but yeah, that's a method. Look it up.
Yeah, it's something about a way of like having meetings to organize your tasks for the week or the day or something.
Yeah, yeah. Huh.
But I'm not that organized. Debbie, my wife, who's also an artist and caricature artist, she helps keep me a lot more organized too. With like, hey, okay, let's have a business meeting. Let's talk about what we're doing. And I never want to talk business or numbers. I glaze over. But it's good to have someone to help you, stay honest and stay, on task.
Yeah. So you have this training with the Watts Atelier and this kind of like classical stuff that you're doing. Did you know about ISCA then, or did you learn about it after, or what was the timeline like on that?
Yeah, ISCA I learned about probably in the late 90s working with caricature artists at the theme parks in SeaWorld here in San Diego. They would ask me if I was going to go to the, at that time, NCN convention. Mort Drucker's going to be there, or Kruger's going to be there. And, so I knew about it from 97 or 98. But my first convention that I went to was when it came to San Diego. I had to wait till it came to me. In the year 2000 was my first one. And I didn't really know what to expect or what I would be doing, but I just did like pencil drawings on white paper. Then everyone else around me was doing paintings and marker and color drawings. And so the year after that, when I went, I came more prepared and brought like colored pencils and some other things I wanted to work with. But
so what was it like? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, at that point I hadn't started taking classes at the Watts Atelier, so I wasn't confident in painting and different materials. So I was just doing sketches those first couple of years at ISCA. It wasn't until 2003 convention. Oh, wait, you know what? Actually, I skipped 2 years. Yeah, so I went to the convention in 2000, and then I skipped 01 and 02, and then my second convention was in 2003, and at that point I'd been going to the Watts Atelier for a couple of years.
Is that when you won the Golden Nosey?
No, that was 2005. So I went to 2003's convention, 2004, and then in 05 is when I won the Golden Nosey.
And what was it like then? What was the artwork like then? Were there people doing those crazy exaggerations? Like, was Nate Kapnitsky even around at that point, for example? Or were people doing the wacky exaggeration or abstract stuff? Or was it mainly like traditional kind of European types or Looney Tunes kind of style?
There were definitely a lot of inspirational, wacky artists at that time in 2003, but I think there was more traditional, old school guys doing just like quick sketch. And those guys kind of faded out as more of the wacky younger people came in. I think because there was some resentment or something. The older guys, like, who are these young guys doing these crazy drawings? You could never sell these drawings to people.
Yeah.
So those guys kind of faded away. But yeah, there always were those inspirational out there artists, especially the artists from Japan who always came, were doing just mind-blowing artwork, like drawing people like abstract shapes or objects, like a house that looked like a person. And like, where do they even come up with those ideas?
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, it was still kind of tame. There was the airbrush artists who were doing their things like Glenn Ferguson and Roger Hurtado and some other people that were doing like really cool, fun exaggerations with a high degree of rendering and realism. There was almost no digital artists at that point. I started doing digital in 2004 because I had started taking classes in how to digital paint by that point. And I did a bunch of, I brought my printer and printed out some of my digital paintings in 2004. And
so you had a laptop and you were using Photoshop or?
Yeah, Photoshop or Corel Painter. I think I was using more Corel Painter at the time. But it wasn't until 2005 I did a mixture of basically color digital paintings and charcoal sketches on newsprint. And that was my wall for the year that I won the Golden Nosey. So I did basically my atelier style drawings, the skills that I learned at the atelier, just charcoal drawings on newsprint, which is kind of funny that I did that because newsprint is not archival at all. And it's not necessarily a piece of artwork that someone can go and hang and preserve. So that was the last year I did charcoal drawings on newsprint. But people liked the drawings I did that year. Looking back, I mean, my artwork was really sloppy. Personally, if I look at it, I'm like, why did I win that year?
Yeah,
my artwork was, my paintings were like just choppy and blocky, and my sketches were honestly, I think, kind of messy and poorly constructed. I hadn't really fully developed my fundamental drawing style that I teach in the Proko course, which is based on my atelier, like Riley method drawing. I mean, I was doing it a little bit, and you know what? In 2005, I think I actually did my first seminar, and I did include a bit of the Riley stuff in that particular seminar.
What do you mean by Riley stuff?
Like, you know the Riley method? That
no, never heard of it.
Okay, so that's brief history. There was an artist at the Art Students League, a teacher named Frank Riley in the early 20th century, and he taught a lot of influential artists. A lot of people went to him and got really good because he taught a method of drawing the head and figure that was based on a system of abstract lines to construct the head, where the construction lines not only defined the plane changes, but also the connections between the features, the relationships, say, between the top of the ear and the bottom of the chin. There'd be a single line you could draw from there to there, and you could do it on this side too. And it really helps you draw the head in perspective, because it's basically a formulaic, abstract, wireframe head model that you can memorize and apply it to new head. And every time you get a model in front of you, you just draw the abstraction first, a simplified version of the head based on this formula. And I ended up being able to apply it to caricatures. So I would do my loose, sloppy, rough sketches or thumbnail sketches, and I would do a tracing of the abstraction on top of that. To find errors that I didn't notice, like if an eye is misaligned, like one's higher, one's lower, the Riley abstraction will tell you that, because to draw the eyes, you draw basically one arcing line from one side to the other, and you do the same on the bottom. And basically, you're drawing both eyes at once. They're guaranteed to match. And if it's turned away from you like this, the head is looking at a different angle, you can still see both eyes, but you still draw those arcing lines, but now you're drawing it like in perspective around a cylinder form. So it's a way of seeing and visualizing the head in 3 dimensions in a way that makes it a little easier to handle. So you're not just trying to like spot place the eye just by luck and hoping you get it. It's a little more systematic, a little more of a procedure to follow every time. And it's I consider it a fundamental drawing skill that will help you in life. If you master those fundamental skills, you can apply those techniques to more advanced exercises and problems.
Do you prefer that method or the Loomis method?
Yeah, Loomis. It's similar to the Loomis method in that, it's a step-by-step way of constructing the head. But yeah, the Loomis method doesn't speak to me as much in my temperament and how I draw. It's a fine way to draw. Like Stan teaches the Loomis method in his Intro to Head Drawing course on the Proko website. And there are elements sometimes where I do, where you draw a cylinder, you draw the sphere of the head, and you chop off, a side plane and a side plane on the other side. And, the measurements of thirds, all that stuff actually is, I do combine that knowledge, I think, with the abstraction. So I might maybe start with a really rudimentary Loomis, like not really even a block in, but I'll just mark off the divisions of the features and things like that, but then I'll do the abstraction on top of that. So I guess maybe I do use a combination of Loomis and Riley, but Riley is a little bit more of a complete method that will get you further to your, closer to your goal, I think, with a higher probability of accuracy.
Okay.
And, correct, perspective and anatomy.
I guess I'm wondering also, like, what was it, like, what was going through your mind, or how were you feeling about when you saw these, like, really crazy exaggerations? Some of them are just wacky for the sake of being wacky, but then some of them are actually really well constructed. I mean, there's some artists out there that really stretch it and they really have things kind of lined up properly, or they make sense somehow, even though they're like almost surrealist kind of caricatures. What was your feeling on that, or what do you think about that?
Well, I really enjoy seeing that kind of thing when it's super well done. When people do that, it's a super big risk. Like the risk of failure, I think, increases tenfold when you do such extreme exaggerations. And I'm talking about stuff with, like, there's one eyeball up here, there's a nose that stretches diagonally down across the page, and the other eyeball's down there. And it's a deconstruction of the face. It's not, you're not really going for a likeness, but if it's recognizable as the subject, that's still a success. But I think caricatures that have a strong quote-unquote likeness, I like looking at those a little bit better, because I will see people who do these crazy abstract exaggerations, and honestly, I don't know who it is. Once they tell you who it is, you can see it, and you're like, oh, yeah, I can see it now. I can decipher that amongst all the shapes you've designed.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it is a success. But if I didn't know who that person was ahead of time, a lot of times I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And it's just saying, like I said, you definitely try to do that, and there are people that do it well, some people that do it not so well, and people that do it well don't necessarily do it well consistently.
Yeah.
But that's what their mindset is. That's what their that's what makes them excited about art, and that's totally cool.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have a 100% success rate, not by a long shot, when I draw a caricature, even my relatively mild exaggeration. I do a lot of pre-sketching sometimes. Some celebrities or subjects give me such difficulty that I try all sorts of different methods. And that's actually how I came up with a lot of my advanced lessons in my Proko course on how to approach the face in different ways, like looking for the spirit animal, or looking for drawing two people side by side, or trying to do a digital painting with no lines. And that might give me a better exaggeration or a better likeness. So I see, those are just things that were born out of my frustrations, not being able to get a likeness the traditional way. I would think of other ways to trick my brain into getting a good exaggeration by switching to my methodology and my goals. I do memory sketching, where like, okay, I've tried drawing this celebrity 30 times. Every one of these sucks. So now this guy's face is burned into my memory. Let's put the photo aside and just draw completely from memory. And I'm like, oh man, I got it. Because I was drawing more from my memory rather than observation. So stuff like that. Time sketches, rapid sketches. Sometimes get you out of your head.
Yeah, that's a big one for me. I always have a timer next to me at the live stand. Yeah, but the thing that I like about the abstract ones, specifically, like what I'm thinking of is Nate Kapnitsky's book Beasted, is that like when I flip through it, there's a moment there where there's some people that are instantly, I can see who it is right away, but then there's like this, some of them he hits it to where it's like there's this split second, or maybe it's 2 or 3 seconds, or maybe 5 seconds where you can just almost feel it come together in your head, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's this person, and then you look it up in the back and it's like, oh, it is. So what's amazing to me about that is like it really shows how sort of advanced the human mind is at taking just information that's not necessarily connected and like putting it together in a pattern and like filling in the blanks. So yeah, it's definitely like a different approach.
Yeah, and again, I do really admire that, because whenever I've tried it, I've failed horribly. It's definitely a skill you have to work at if you want to be an extreme abstract caricature artist. And you have to have the mental attitude, but it's just not my personality, I'm not like, again, I'm not a hang glider, I'm not a parachuter, I'm just a guy who'd rather sit in the studio. And the stuff I like looking at the most are the realistic, rendered, Kruger style, Jan Optebeek style, Thierry Coquelet, where they have, amazing construction of the head.
Yeah.
It's so solid looking, and the planes of the face are so well rendered. Not that it's about rendering or time that you put into it. It's the fundamental construction, the choices that were made at the beginning stages that are the most critical.
Mm-hmm.
The rendering style doesn't matter to me so much, but if it's well constructed and looks instantly like the person, and it's hilarious and really exaggerated, that's my goal. That's what I like to see, and that's what I like to do.
Something that you just said is a theme that's been coming up in some of the interviews, which is about, you said it's just not my personality. And I think that's an important thing for artists to find. Sometimes it takes a while, but it is important to kind of be honest with yourself about what your personality is. And because what I find is people that I know more intimately that are caricature artists, I totally see their personality and their style. Like you're more organized, and you have this background at the Watts Atelier, so it makes sense that you're not really as interested in looking at these kind of like wild, crazy, abstract exaggerations. But the people that I know that actually make that art, their minds, like the way they think, and the things that they talk about outside of the caricature community, it's like, oh, I can see why this person likes to completely deconstruct the face, because they're deconstructing these other ideas in other areas of their life too, And like Manny's a good example where he's like, you know, he's kind of a thrill seeker, you know, and it shows through in his artwork too. So
Yeah, that's a good assessment. It is definitely related to your personality, and if you know some of these guys, uh, they're fun to hang out with and got some really great ideas and some scary ideas. But yeah, it's great because it all adds to the texture of the art world, and you know, it's always great when the average person's mind can be blown by seeing one of these guys' caricatures, where it still looks like the person, and it's like a totally abstract. Again, I don't even, you know, whenever I try to do that, it's not successful because it's like trying to write in someone else's handwriting,
yeah,
or to be a forger. You know, maybe you can copy someone's artwork, but to really become that person, that type of artist, yeah, I think it goes along with a lifestyle and a way of viewing the world, and you know, a certain attitude. I don't know if it's like a anarchist streak or something.
Yeah. Okay, I actually wanted to know too, like, how did you feel when you won the Nosey? Like, what was that like? That must have been thrilling, huh? Or were you surprised? Or
Yeah, I mean, there's always a bit of surprise. You know, I'd been not really working up to it, but I had gone to 2000. So that was my fourth convention, and every year I had won a higher and higher level of award.
oh, nice.
The first year I won like ninth place. I think the next time I won fourth place, and the year after that I won fifth artist of the year. I'm like, oh wait, I'm going the wrong direction. But you know, I don't want to say it was my goal when going to those conventions to win the top award, but I was like, everyone just has that in the back of their mind. I think when they go, like, wow, what if it's me? What if I win this year?
Yeah. And were you doing like oil painting, or like as you moved along, were you using the same mediums, or were you like, what was that like?
I changed it up every year to kind of see what stuck, like what people responded to, and I would look at the works on the walls that I responded to, and I would try to go more towards that, like people that not necessarily I wouldn't try to copy the people that won, but the works that made the most impression on me, the ones that won the awards, and I'm like, okay, yeah. So, like I said, the first year I went, I just did graphite pencil sketches on my theme park white paper. They were totally not impressive at all, but they still won ninth place. But the ones I did like were, I think it was Dino Casterline's drawings, colored pencil drawings on colored paper. They looked amazing. So the next time I came to the convention, I did exactly that. I just copied Dino's style, or not his style, but his materials. And I got pretty decent results with that. And then the year after that, 2003, I think I did more. Yeah, I did a couple oil paintings and a couple digital paintings because I was branching out and trying to be a little more artsy on my third convention. And then by the fourth, I just brought digital, like my laptop to paint digitally, and some charcoal paper. And I'm like, just keep it to like stuff I'm good at. Let's not try to get experimental this year. Just like, I've been working for a couple of years now with charcoal and newsprint. I've been working with digital painting for a couple of years and oil painting, even though I didn't bring oil paints the year I won. So I worked with materials that I'd been focused on most in my education, the ones that I had most experience with, and that's when I got the best results, I think. The results that people responded to anyway.
Nice.
And I don't know if I have a theory or a opinion about what type of work tends to win, but it's generally like the work that wins tends to have a good impact from a distance and from up close. So if your work doesn't look good from a distance, it's not going to really attract people to come closer to your wall and look at it. So it has to have good values and contrast, I think. Like it has to stand out from the wall. And then when they get close, they have to like really appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into the finesse of the line or the shading that you're doing. So it has to work on both levels, I think. And there is some work that people do that shows better when you're up close, but when you stand back, it kind of like blends in and falls away.
Yeah.
So that's the trap, I think. I think if people want to go for the award-winning artwork, it has to have, I don't know if it's contrast necessarily, but a good control of your values, well-structured drawings, and a cohesive visual style. But you can have different styles within your artwork, I think. Like you can do like some pen and inks and some acrylic paintings, and all together that I think also impresses people. So every year it's a little different. It's not always somebody who just works in one style. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it's a person like Joe Bloom who has every single drawing he did on his wall the year he won Golden Nosey was like a totally different material, totally different style. There was pencil drawings, colored pencils, markers, other things. And and that's the year he won. And I think he impressed people with his command of several different materials. I don't know.
So I wanted to ask about the business side, because you won the Golden Nosey, and then what happened after that? Did you make a decision to really get into the live work, or did you decide to keep teaching, or what happened afterward?
Well, my life didn't really change. I mean, there was parties every night for the next year. No. I just continued on with my work as normal. The rest of the world doesn't know what the heck a Golden Nosey is.
Yeah.
You put it on your website, and every now and then maybe you tell a client who's on the fence, in an email, oh, by the way, I did win the blah 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 this year. It's like the Oscars for the caricature world. I rarely ever do that, or I ever did that, just because it sounded weird to talk about yourself that way.
Yeah.
Hopefully people just find the information on your website, and hopefully that adds to your credibility. And you can maybe charge more for your work. But I guess I maybe focused on, I want to be more of a painter and illustrator, fine artist, and doing higher end commissions for people, because that's what I like to do. I don't like doing quickie stuff. I mean, I do it for the parties, and I do it for that because it's good money. It's hard to turn down that, because I was making a good living doing events, doing 3-minute event sketches. But doing that, just that, it allowed me time to take classes to improve my skills. It allowed me time to work on my own art at home, because I didn't. After 2001, I never had a real job since then. I've just been totally freelance. And I've had a lot of time to be able to devote into my career because the parties paid so well.
So you were able to utilize, I guess that's my question, and that's kind of a dilemma that I find as well, which is I want to spend more time learning and increasing my skills, but I'm so busy with the live drawings, and then I have this podcast thing going, so it's it's hard to kind of find that balance between developing the business, the online store, the podcast, the Instagram account, all that stuff, and make time to grow as an artist. So how did you come to terms with that, or how did you navigate that?
I hate the business side of things. I hate promoting myself. I hate putting in time to do that sort of thing. Yeah. I only got Instagram I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I was dragged in kicking and screaming, just because I'm oh God, here's another thing I have to update. I used to I got sick of trying to update my blog, and I haven't updated my blog since 2010. I don't know if it's still even out there. But I'm isn't Facebook enough? I mean, I probably could get more work and higher end work if I was more active and more enterprising. So I'm not maybe the best example for bringing in work and advice on how to do that. But it has helped. Getting part of Proko has upped my profile a bit too. People know me more from that now. Mm-hmm. So I went to the Lightbox Expo last year, which is the Southern California illustrators concept design exhibition. And people every now and then would stop me, and they were they knew me from something, but they didn't know what. And I got actually several different names. Oh, you're that artist, something that does those animal drawings. I'm nope. Yeah. So I had to go look up all these people that they thought I looked like. So I was familiar to a lot of people. Some people knew who I was, but not a lot. Kyle Webster knew who I was, which was cool. I sat in on his seminar on Photoshop brushes. He makes all the Photoshop brushes.
Oh, I don't know about those. Yeah.
I raised my hand and asked a question, and he goes, "Oh, by the way, do I know you from somewhere?" And I'm maybe Proko. And he goes, "Yeah, cool." So that was kind of fun, but it's I just always tried to have a balance in my career from the stuff that I needed to do versus the stuff I really wanted to do. And I still enjoy doing parties and events. It's not a bad thing to do them. And they pay, like I said, I can support myself with events. And if I don't support myself with fine art or caricature commissions, that's okay, because I've got this other thing to rely on. Of course, with the pandemic, I found out caricatures at events is a very non-essential job. Yeah. And all parties have been canceled. But we've been doing some Zoom events where we draw live over the webcams, and I did some of that before the pandemic, so I was already, I knew how to do that. Nice. So we're trying to promote that, but I mean, the website helps. People will find me every now and then to do a commission, but I try to market myself as just the high-end caricature artist, where I don't do I don't draw you roller skating, in front of the Eiffel Tower. That's not my deal. I tell people I do fine art caricature portraits that are like family heirlooms that you can hang on the wall. I do oil paints, fine art, digital paintings, and watercolors sometimes.
And these are all private commissions?
Yeah, but I don't do a lot of them. I'm not overwhelmed by those types of works. I got a couple on the drawing board right now for people. I think they're more for like they're podcasts actually for people that found my work and want a nice illustration of themselves for their podcast. But yeah, it's a hard sell sometimes being the high-end caricature artist who charges a lot more than other people. But that's okay with me because I don't want to do a lot of quantity for very little money for each one. Every now and then I do, like if a big job comes in and they want me to do 300 people, I'll give them a really good rate and I'll get the job done. Me and Debbie actually did this. We had this client where we did like each time they contacted us, they had like 1,200 pets they wanted us to do. So we spend like 2 or 3 weeks doing that and divide the work amongst us, and sometimes farm the work out to some other artists. Yeah, sometimes I do the quantity if it's like a really well-paying job overall. But yeah, I don't try to do the like $20, $30, $50 sketches. Mm-hmm. Although at this time during the pandemic, I'm not turning down much work if it comes in because beggars can't be choosers. But I still try to create that image via my website and my online presence that I'm the guy that does the nice paintings for you that you'll be that will be preserved for years and your children will want to hang up in their house.
So that kind of happened. That sort of happened organically, right? Like you kind of transitioned into that and started building that clientele up. And
yeah, I mean, it was a conscious decision too to like not do that. So if someone wrote me and wanted me to, hey, we got this, we'd love for you to do a caricature of our boss, and he's going to be playing golf and he loves wine and he loves motorcycling. Can you make him doing all that?
Yeah.
I say, well, I don't really do that sort of artwork for you, but here's someone who might be able to help you with that. And I would refer them to someone else because those kind of jobs, they never want to pay anything. And it would take me hours to do it because I think it was born out of the realization that I wouldn't say a perfectionist, but I like spending a lot of time making something look really good. And I can't make something look really good really fast. And maybe it's just a shortcoming I have. But even if I did charge really cheap prices, I would still be spending just as much time doing the artwork that I need to do to make it look good.
You can't justify the lower quality for the time. You're more of a
I don't want to do low quality for a low price. I just want to do high quality for a high price.
Isn't there the business tool or outlook where like you can only choose 2 things like speed, price, and quality? You can only pick
you get 2 out of the 3, but you can't get all 3.
Yeah. So that kind of was the question I had before, that you have a lot of great resources and you're pretty active online. I noticed that you're like updating, you're doing a lot of live stuff on like Twitch and Yeah,
actually, just on YouTube right now. I don't have a Twitch account or anything. I don't even know much about that. I'm sort of a older Gen X guy, and I don't really understand Discord and Twitch and all that. YouTube is about as fast-paced as I want to get. But and when the pandemic hit, after a couple weeks of being locked down, I'm like, you know what? Let's start doing live streaming. I never really had an urge to do it before, but I thought if we're going to be stuck at home for a long time, not socializing, not seeing friends, not seeing family, not doing gigs, so like I want more constant outreach and like connection with people. I just think the connection with the public is really, really just beneficial for me, just to like see, people enjoy hearing my voice and wanting me to say things to them. Not that I need validation. It's just nice to connect with people. So yeah, I do the live streams. I think I started my first one the last week in March, and I've been doing them every week since, and it's been really cool. And I don't have a huge following of a live audience right now. Like I'll do maybe like 30, 40 people tops will be watching me live every week, but it's the same people and they're loyal. And I really appreciate them. They always have great questions, and they help make the stream better because maybe I'm not explaining something that they don't get. So they'll ask a question in the chat and I'll be able to answer in real time. And it's a really cool way to interact with people and do art, because sometimes they'll, say, hey, that leg looks too short. Are you sure that's right, Court? And I'll be a little like sad and be like, yeah, you're right. And it'll make my art look better.
Yeah. So people can check out your live streams and stuff, but is there any general advice that you want to give to people who want to reach your level of mastery?
Well, again, I don't think I'm a master of anything, and I think most artists who are considered masters will say the same thing, because there's no upper limit, I think, to learning and getting better in art. Mastery is just a goal that you're never going to reach, basically. There's a time where you've stopped and like, oh, I'm done. I've mastered this. I can die now. You know, it's never, if there is a point where that happens, like, I don't want to be there because that would, I think, be kind of depressing.
Yeah, it's a road.
Looking back, maybe there will be a piece that'll be considered my masterpiece at some point, but I don't know what that's going to be. However, I understand the question. And, I mean, I credit anything, any knowledge or skills I have, honestly, with my traditional art training at the Watts Atelier. It was just good, fundamental, hands-on teaching. It was not a lot of fancy tricks or style. It was just, these are the procedures. And when you do it wrong, the teacher will come and draw on top of your drawing or paint on top of your painting to show you how it could be better. And then just, you know, go to art shows, look online for artists you admire. Every now and then a workshop from a famous artist comes up, and go to that if you really want to. Like, I'm really inspired by Jeremy Lipkin, is one of my favorite all-time artists, and he teaches workshops every now and then. I took a few from him and learned a lot. Workshops can be dangerous, though, the short-term workshops, because they'll be really inspiring for, like, those 2 or 3 days that you're taking it, and you'll go home and it'll totally screw up your methodology because you're trying to emulate that style, that procedure that you saw, but it's not yet part of your fiber or your being.
Yes.
The real way you make an art training part of your fiber and your being is through constant repetition over a long period of time. Workshops don't do that. They give you some inspiration and maybe some tips and tricks that you can incorporate over time the more you practice them. But yeah, it's only through constant repetition and good practice that it will actually truly affect your skills.
Yeah, that's actually, there's 2 things I want to say about that. First off, I had the exact same experience because I took Steven Silver's character design workshop at the last ISCA, and I was so inspired by that, and so that I tried to do that on my wall, and they turned out okay, but it was like the first time that I did that, so there was nothing really super impressive about that. I was just trying like a new method. The other thing, though, aside from my experiences, that this idea of the illusion of progress, I think, is something that people need to be mindful of, because it's easy to watch a YouTube video that's 10 minutes long and the person teaches you something, and then you think that, like, there's a feeling that I get, which is like, oh yeah, like I'm actually learning something, you know, like I'm really I've made some progress, you know, like it can trick me into thinking I'm actually making progress, but the real progress is made when you apply it over and over and over and over and over again. So that's something that I personally have to be mindful of.
Yeah, it's the same exact thing as if you, like, transpose another subject on top of it instead of art. Like, if it was, you wanted to learn a foreign language, could you do that? Could you get better at speaking a foreign language with a 3-day workshop in that foreign language, or an instrument, playing the trumpet or the piano? I mean, yeah, you might learn a couple things and you might be able to say a couple phrases in that foreign language, but then you'll forget it and it won't be part of your vocabulary, and you won't be able to carry on a proper conversation with someone after taking a 3-day workshop. You have to, you know, it's months and years of training, practice, and application that actually make you fluent or make you virtuous in that instrument. You can't improvise, you can't create, you know. And so, yeah, you have to constantly do your scales. You have to learn your vocabulary. And the same exact thing applies to art. It's exactly the same. It's no different. There's nobody that's born innately knowing how to speak a foreign language. There's nobody that's born innately that can play the piano. People can learn it faster than others, I think, but it's the same thing with art. There's a myth. I think it's a myth that people are born talented. It's super insulting when someone tells me, "Oh, you just have a gift. I could never do what you do. You just naturally can do it." And I'm like, absolutely not. I studied for 10, 15 years to get to this place, lady. You know, I was not naturally gifted. I just liked it and kept with it.
Yeah, it's about commitment and persistence. I think it was Thomas Jefferson that's who this quote is attributed to, that it's 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. I always go back to that one. I think that's the best quote to say.
That says it very succinctly.
Yeah, I mean the thing is there are certain people that are more drawn to particular fields or whatever, but it's not. Maybe that is what motivates them to do more work in that particular field, but they still have to put the work in. And yeah,
Yeah,
um,
and I do think there are something about certain people that make them learn it really quickly. Like maybe they have an aptitude to learn it fast, but they wouldn't have been able to do it if no one taught them and if they didn't practice.
right.
So yeah, there are those oddities like the Mozarts of the world or the Frank Frazettas of the world, but but yeah, they still had to practice to get there. It wasn't automatic, but they just were something about their brain and their muscle coordination allowed them to do it a little faster than some of us.
Yeah. So do you want to look at some fan work, fan questions?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Cool. Why don't we start with Alfred? Because Alfred's been drawing. He told me.
Yeah, Alfred's cool. He just got into art really recently. Started taking the Proko course, and I've had
Nice.
communication with him over the years.
Oh, so he's doing a Proko course now.
Yeah, he did my Art of Caricature course in Proko.
Oh, nice. Okay. So I asked him how long he's been practicing caricatures. He said about 3 years, but he's been a huge fan for over 50 years. Yeah. So yeah, he's. I feel for him because he's trying and trying and trying, and I can actually see a little bit of progress in his work. I can see he's starting to get likeness better, and when I first started drawing caricatures, I went to the same kind of school you did, so I didn't really learn much technique. So when I started actually doing the caricatures, they looked kind of like his, but for me, I was on the street drawing every day, and I was making tons of bad drawings every day of live customers. And I think with that kind of pressure, I was able to, it motivated me. There was that pressure every day from people looking at the work, showing them my drawings over and over and over again that maybe he doesn't have. But I think maybe I have a theory with Alfred that maybe his practice, like, you know, they say practice makes perfect, but there's another saying that perfect practice makes perfect. So I'm not sure if he's actually practicing in the right way, or maybe we could give him some techniques on how he might be able to practice better and kind of accelerate his learning. So I'll let you take the lead on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I remember seeing Alfred's drawings from the beginning. He was one of the original participants when the course was coming out live from week to week. So we would do, you know, critiques and feedbacks at that time too. And I've seen a lot of progress from his earlier sketches. The construction is better now than it had been, and the likenesses are definitely better. And I think he has overall more confidence in his strokes and his drawings in general. They don't seem quite as timid. And you know, I almost always see a likeness pretty strongly in his drawings. You know, there's Sean Connery. You know, I'm looking at some of the other ones he sent in. You know, Samuel L. Jackson, and he's got the key traits in there. It's just still an issue with, I think, handling and understanding forms and how they relate to each other, and also issues with rendering and shading. So all his drawings are still very, very flat. They're just line drawings, which is okay. I mean, as a theme park artist or party artist, I just draw line drawings. But the underlying structure needs a little work still, like as far as building the forms, imagining the head as a collection of spheres or cylinders that are symmetrical with features line up. And I mean, they're really close. You know, some of them are like I honestly I could do a tracing of them, and they're fundamentally actually not too bad. If I were to trace them, I'd be like, you know, that's if I just trace it in my own style, that's actually a pretty decent drawing. But like on the Jack Black, say there's a problem with the eyes. Like the eye on the right is really close to the nose, and the eye on the left is really far from the nose. And that's something where maybe if he flips his drawings in reverse, he might be able to see some of those structural flaws. Because when you're drawing your own drawing for a long time, looking at it, you tend to get blind to the problems. Mm-hmm. And I'm constantly flipping my drawings. That's my secret, actually, is I flip my drawings in reverse or look at them backwards, and I see like where the issues really are. And you know, getting up, walking away, coming back in an hour, that can help too. Just getting fresh eyes on the subject. And I don't know. I would just say, I mean, he could explore the three-dimensional qualities a little bit better too. Like if you want to do the nose, shade the nose. Don't just outline it, and work with that. And also maybe work on a slightly more controlled line. Like maybe do a tracing of your earlier drawings. If the earlier drawings are kind of sketchy and loose like this, see how you can improve it at the next stage with better draftsmanship or calligraphy, like a thin and thick. If you want to stick with lines, you definitely need to work on the thin and thick quality of the lines.
Yeah,
maybe
line
that's
variation.
materials. Yeah, I mean, with pencil, it's hard. You can draw over your lines 2 and 3 times to make them thicker and darker. With pens and ink, you could definitely do that a little more easily. But ink is unforgiving, of course. If you make a mistake, it's there. But yeah, I mean, the rendering and the shading is, that's I would say a secondary issue for a little further down the road. It still needs to be more of a construction thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's I know he knows the Riley method, and we've gone over that a few times. And I've seen some of his Riley abstraction drawings. But it needs to be applied a little bit more conscientiously, I think. Mm-hmm. Where I think a lot of people fail with using the Riley abstraction with my method, where it's used as a corrections method. In our atelier training, we would use the Riley method to actually construct the head from the ground up. Mm-hmm. Whereas in caricature, I don't use the Riley method to construct the caricature. I use my thumbnail sketches to do that. It's like I come up with the concept, then I do the rough sketch, and then I take the rough sketch and I use the Riley abstraction as a layover, like I put tracing paper on top of the drawing, and then do my corrections with the Riley. And I think when people do that, all they're doing is tracing the Riley rhythms over their misaligned features. They're missing the point. They're not using the Riley abstraction to find the errors, as I do. And the problem might be that the original drawing is just influencing them too much. Mm-hmm. So maybe if they use like 3 sheets of tracing paper instead of 1, where it dims down that original drawing even more, maybe they'll be less influenced by it. But you need to start focusing not on the original drawing as you're doing the Riley abstraction. Just use that as your starting point when you're doing your Riley tracings, and just get a good well-constructed wireframe head, even if it means you have to divert significantly from your rough sketch. Like those eyes are not aligned properly. So when you do the Riley abstraction, the lines are going to have to, the arcing lines that form the abstractions for the eyes are going to have to be moved. And you have to be conscious of that when you're drawing. So it takes a lot of concentration when you're doing that, and being willing and able to look past the original drawing so it doesn't influence you as much.
One thing, and I'm not sure about the Riley method, I haven't used it yet, but one thing that I notice whenever I'm doing shading, actually, I'll do the line work and then I'll go in and do the shading, and I find mistakes when I do the shading. Maybe not with alignment or anything like that, because that's pretty natural. It comes pretty natural to me now. But maybe just with the shape, because I do pretty heavy exaggeration when I do live drawings. But when you do the shade, you can do all kinds of stuff with line work. But then when you go in and do the shading and try to make a form out of it, you realize oh, wait a minute, do you think maybe that approach would work with his? Because he's doing really line work. I don't really see any shading or building of the structure. Or do you think that that's more important for him to start with the structure or the wireframe?
Well, I think the best way to learn good proper drawing procedures is to use a tonal method of drawing, and that's what I learned at the Watts Atelier. Is you draw and shade almost at the same time, so you're using the shading to help you in the construction of the drawing.
Yeah.
So you'll use so we always draw from models with really strong shadows and lighting, because that's the best way to practice that method. Drawing celebrity photos taken with a flash on the red carpet, there's almost no shadows. So in that sense, it's a little harder to practice tonal drawing that way. So photo reference might help a little bit to change that, to draw from only more naturally lit photos with shadows, because then you can see what's going on more. It's really hard to draw tonally from when you're just working in halftones.
I was going to recommend that to him too. I don't know if you've given him any references, but there's a few online, free online references, and some are paid, but you can get models with really great lighting. There's one, Earth's World. Oh man, I'm blanking on all of them now. Do you have any that you use?
I don't really use them, but I know one that's coming to mind. Like you, I sometimes forget like the names of different resources, but there is one that you can get online model references. I think it's called Croquis Cafe.
That's right, Croquis Cafe. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's more figure drawing models though, but I think they're high resolution enough where you can probably draw from the face if you want. But they're not really celebrities, so it's if you want to practice likeness on celebrities, it's more just you got to do Google searches for the people you want. So
But maybe that's better though. You know, maybe that will help him to kind of like quit thinking so much about the likeness, and it'll help him focus more on the technique and the structure. And the other thing with that, I think with the Croquis Cafe, I think you can set a timer, and that's what I was going to recommend to him. I mean, only because that's what helped me. Was that, you know, you say, okay, 90 seconds, I got to somehow capture this face in 90 seconds. And before you go into practice, say, I'm going to use the Riley technique on every one of these, and you do it for a half an hour like that, and you just try to focus every face that flashes by. You try to get that Riley technique on, bam, 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 bam. And that's what I mean by perfect practice, because it's like really reinforcing that muscle memory and forcing you to think about how you can apply that method immediately without because like you said, your eyes get tired or you get too connected with the drawing somehow, or you look at a drawing for too long, it's like it automatically handicaps you. I mean, that's been my experience anyway. So
I think that's a good point. It would really help fundamental skills for any artist to just focus on the practice of drawing and not really focus on celebrity caricatures or one niche element. I think the thing that made me a stronger artist was, that traditional training, drawing models, learning the procedure, and then I could apply that proper procedure to my caricature and illustration work. Mm-hmm. But I don't, just on a side note, I don't recommend anyone try doing Riley abstractions on 90-second drawings. It's really hard. Even in 5 minutes, that's a little too fast for a Riley drawing.
Okay.
Because you don't want to like rush through the rhythms too much. I would say at least 10 minutes.
Okay.
20 minutes is ideal. I love the 20-minute time limit for drawing a head or drawing the figure. That's just enough time to lay it in and get good construction. However, I do love 2-minute, 1-minute quick sketches, 3-minute quick sketches. I just do more of a gesture approach. I don't do construction or anatomy or form really. I just try to get I block in the major shapes. I block in the flow and the gesture. Some people might be able to do detailed construction drawings in that amount of time. But it's really hard, and I think you need to have a little more time for that. So with really quick sketches, I think it's better to just go with gesture and indication rather than forms and construction.
Yeah, there's something about having a specific time limit, whether it's 90 seconds or 5 minutes, that eliminates a lot of the circular kind of thinking in the head, because you don't have time for it. You have to kind of just get it out and do the best you can and go with your first impression. And for me, that's what's really trained me to be able to see automatically or see quickly is, I think it just has to be trained, and that just has to, the only way that I know how to do that is like, okay, we're going to do, 10 5-minute drawings, and you set the timer and it's like, go, 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 and you really work it in.
Yeah, and just understanding what your goals and limitations are for each timed drawing is super critical. So I basically start a head or figure drawing the same way each time. The first couple minutes, I'll do the gesture. If I have 4 or 5 minutes, I can actually do some of the, like a mannequinized version, like a simplified version of the form. If I have 10 minutes, I can get almost everything sort of mapped out. 20 minutes is enough to really get everything mapped out and even mostly shaded. And then if you have 2 hours or 3 hours, then you can actually do the rendering. So, it's a mistake when people have such a short amount of time and they try to cram in like a rendering in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Thinking like, I'm going to do all the musculature and the shadows and the cast shadows and the form shadows. No, you can do it. Maybe you have some time after that, but you got to understand what your limitations are and follow your procedure strictly and stick to it based on the time limits. So don't try to do too much in a short amount of time. But then also if you have a whole lot of time, you got to figure out how to fill that time properly. So there are people that they only do quick sketches, and if you give them a 3-hour pose, they won't know what to do with themselves after the first 20 minutes, and they'll get bored and just change seats and move to another position in the room and draw them again. And that can be okay, but if you have 3 hours to draw something like a model, you need to know what kind of methods to do, what kind of your goal should be to fill up that time. So you could actually slow down and do all the steps properly in that amount of time. And you can get a really nice shaded rendered drawing with the clothing and the fabrics in the background even. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's understanding what your limitations are and your goals are. You set your goals for each time sketch that you do.
Yeah, I think that's a big trip up for artists, is that it's like, you know, if you have 10 minutes, it's not sexy to have a 10-minute sketch. You know, you want all that rendering. So I think people leap ahead a lot and they try to get the rendering done first, you know, before they get the structure in. And I don't know exactly what if Alfred is doing that or not, but it's something to be aware of. It's a pitfall for sure. I'm going to play his question.
Hello, Sam. How are you doing? Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to ask Court regarding my drawing. I seem to have problems, especially with the Riley method. I've tried, and for some reason I don't seem to be getting it. I don't know why. I've also had a look at how to push it in a certain way, but for some reason it doesn't seem to be clicking with me, and I don't know what the block is. Maybe I'm over pushing myself or something. Is there something that Court can help me with? Maybe he can explain what it is that I need to do. Thank you.
Yeah, I love his voice and his accent.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of funny. We did address it a little bit about working with the Riley method and problems with it. And I think he just maybe is suffering from that thing I talked about, where he knows what the rhythm lines are. He has the diagram. He knows what it should be drawing. And when he applies it to his rough sketch to try to correct it, the Riley rhythms are just being traced over the exact original faulty drawing. So it's just a matter of being distracted by the original drawing and not focusing enough on that. So I don't know, like a metaphor for it might be like just a cube, like a building. Like maybe we can insert this later. I can do a quick drawing and overlay it here. But like say I draw a really wonky rectangular building, and it's a little crooked on one side, you know, and I want to figure out how to correct it. Well, what I'll do is I'll do a tracing of that, and I want to trace the correct lines over it the way it should be. So maybe I'll get out my ruler and I'll see it a little bit more clearly now because I've dimmed down the original drawing, and I'm going to trace the straight lines over the crooked lines. If I just traced over the exact same lines, my abstraction or my trace over of this building is going to be wrong. So it's a matter of being able to see what those flaws are as you're tracing them and to understand. So you got to get back from it. You got to flip it in reverse if that helps, and then do the abstraction while it's in reverse. But it's super important to not just trace over those original bad lines that you put in, because the whole point of it is to jump past those. So maybe after just drawing even the sphere of the head, like a circular shape for the head of like Jack Black, maybe at that point, maybe do a center line where his center line is. Maybe just even get rid of the original drawing. Don't take it out from underneath your tracing paper and just draw the abstraction. Do a perfect like overlay of the Riley abstraction or where the features sit on that sphere, while maybe the drawing is now off to the side. It's not directly underneath your paper anymore. And that could be maybe a way to trick your brain into doing a correct abstraction, because you're just getting rid of it. You just have the base information of the size and shape and position of the head, and maybe the center line of the head. And then you just, it's easier then to recreate, like, say, a mannequin or robot head with correct features than it is to, say, draw a naturalistic human head with all of its quirks and contours. So, yeah, it's a matter of just focusing on the next step and not being sucked back into the original drawing.
Yeah, and I want to just say about creativity that a lot of my creativity and the way I'm able to learn and get past a lot of these creative blocks is just restricting myself. Like if I'm doing something 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times and it doesn't seem to be working, I'll take a completely different approach. So if I'm doing line work, I'll say, okay, well, I can't do the line work anymore, and I just have to go in with values first. or something that just really forces me out of like whatever kind of sort of glitch that I'm stuck in. And it sounds like he's kind of stuck in a glitch. So yeah, I like that advice. Like maybe take the drawing completely away. Maybe he can try to start with it in the beginning and see if that works better for him, or just something like a completely different approach to just kind of like, get rid of that bug, get rid of that glitch.
Yeah, and caricatures can have the added difficulty of you're always being pulled in different directions based on your desire to exaggerate, as well as get a good sound, clean drawing. So sometimes the exaggeration aspect throws the structure off, and people end up distorting the face rather than exaggerating.
Mm-hmm.
And a distortion to me is the opposite of exaggeration. It's just something that stretches the face in an arbitrary way that doesn't help the likeness. It's just being done for the sake of looking funny and extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But like if someone gives like cheeks that just jut out, twice the width of the actual head, and it doesn't connect with the rest of the face, it doesn't make a lot of sense. That kind of distortion, and that's not Alfred's issue, but maybe if you did focus on, not maybe worrying about exaggeration so much at this stage,
mm-hmm.
and just getting a good sound, well-constructed drawing,
mm-hmm.
the exaggeration can come later.
Yeah.
To me, the most important thing about caricature is likeness. That's number one. Structure and construction is probably second most important, because you can still have a really great, funny likeness of somebody, and it's a poorly constructed drawing,
mm-hmm.
and that's fine too. If you can recognize the person, that's a great achievement. And exaggeration is like a distant third.
Yeah.
And people put too much emphasis sometimes on exaggeration, and it messes with their heads and sometimes muddles their goals.
Yeah, I actually had that thought earlier when I was looking at his work, that maybe it's best to just start with those fundamentals of portraiture, because once you get that down, it makes it much easier to do the exaggeration, because at that point, if you have the structure correct, it makes the exaggeration a lot stronger and more believable, and you can just apply the rule of constant mass to that. It's a pretty simple formula once you know once you have the structure down.
The law of constant mass, that's where like if you want to add structure of mass to one part of the head, you have to take it away from somewhere else.
Yeah. Or if you another part of that is if you put the eyes together, then usually you drop the nose, or if you spread the eyes apart, usually the nose comes up.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard talk like that before, but I don't necessarily agree with that. It totally depends on the person's likeness. Like that seems like an arbitrary exaggeration rule.
Which part, the mass or the eyes?
Well, the idea that like it's on a pulley. Like if the nose goes longer, the eyes have to come closer, and if you raise the nose up, the eyes have to come further apart. That to me like seems like it would be a trap where it might influence you to miss somebody's likeness.
Yeah, I think it has to be a combination. That can't just be the only thing that you change. Like the mass also has to be moved and equalized in a different part of the face. That's not like just one simple rule that you can apply to exaggeration, but it's just a tool that you can use in conjunction with the other tools to kind of make it work. So we have another artwork by Chance McGee.
Yeah, let's look at like the one with like the 6 or 7 people in it, the nun and the girl waving and all that.
Okay.
The color one. Yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, this is really good stuff. Oh yeah, there it is. I'm trying to open it in the background.
Actually, I'll play the. He sent a question, so I'll play that first.
Okay.
Hi, Court Jones. This is Chance McGee here, fellow caricature artist. Super honored to be able to ask you a question, and very grateful to Sam for organizing this. Doing a lot of really, really good high-profile interviews lately, and I really appreciate that. So my question is one related to business. As a caricature artist, I primarily make my income through festivals and busking, basically in the inner city. And lately, I've been branching out to do more commission work. I've been working for a small kind of theme park that wants me to draw their logo design, a small kind of a little boy who's in different situations with tools and whatnot. I worked for a brief period as a sketch artist for Netflix, and they commissioned me for things that they wanted. And then additionally, I was doing some commission work, just normal commissions, caricature commissions. And I noticed that, especially after COVID-19, I've been putting a lot more energy and focus on the commission work. But what's been happening is I feel like I'm being split into two artists. There's this one who draws at festivals and makes money directly from sales immediately that I get from drawing people. And then there's this other artist that's working to build a reputation and trying to maintain relationships with clients and get new clients. I don't really feel like I'm moving at the same time in both directions. So my question is, did you have to deal with this at any point? Or I know you started off, or at least I think you started off, correct me if I'm wrong, as a caricature artist working in a theme park setting. How did you branch off into the other type of art? And is that something that you see as a necessary leap to make if you want to be more successful business-wise? Or is it possible to do both at the same time? And if so, what kind of advice would you give me? Because right now I feel like, I feel like I'm being split in two directions, and I haven't quite figured out how to pull those things together and really bring my skills to bear, and also more than anything, just time, like manage my time better so that I'm focusing in a way where I don't feel like I'm being diluted too much. So yeah, that's my question. I hope it makes sense. And just as a final note, I was very happy to hear how you inspired Kage to start Caricature Japan. He had the opportunity to work with you, and that really set the tone for what he wanted to establish for the standard of art in Japan. And I look at what Kage does in Japan and some of his colleagues like Hosoke as the standard for the quality that I try to bring to my live caricature work. So I'm a big, huge fan of you and the influence that you have on a global scale. So thank you in advance for any input that you have. And I hope the question makes sense. It's a bit foggy in my mind, so maybe you have further insights that I'm not even aware of. Thank you. Hi, Court Jones. This is Chance McGee here, fellow
Chance is the
king.
king.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, he's the king of long questions. I think that one was like 5 minutes. But yeah, I didn't even know that about your influence with Kage. That's cool. I didn't know that you were involved in his story and the Caricature Japan story.
Yeah, a little bit. No, I'm not. I don't think I was responsible for inspiring him to start Caricature Japan. He, from what I know, he came to San Diego to work a little bit, and he worked for another artist named Dave Stevens in California Caricature at shopping malls. And I think maybe I met him briefly when I went to the mall and just saw him there, and I didn't know him at the time at all. This was like 2000, 2001, maybe 1999, something like that. And so he lived and worked in San Diego for a while, and I didn't know him at the time. And I was just working in the theme parks still, doing gigs. But I didn't have any run-ins with him or any conversations with him until 2003, I believe, at the first caricature convention I went back to after not going for a couple of years. And so I met him there and had chatted with him, drew him one night. And a couple months later, he came out to San Diego from Japan and asked me if I wanted to come out later that year to work with some of his people and do some workshops. And I'm like, come to Japan and you'll pay for it? Sure.
Yeah.
And so he'd already had his business at that point. Like for the past 3 or 4 years before that, I think he went back to Japan and opened his own concession business where he would be in shopping malls and retail locations in Tokyo. And that's quite a feat in Tokyo, I believe. From what I know and from what Kage told me, it's super difficult to get a business started in Japan. It's really expensive to get off the ground. And but he's like, again, one of those super smart, very accomplished, enterprising people, businessmen, who knows what they're doing and knows how to grow his business. Mm-hmm. He'd be an interesting guy to talk to, I think, about growing business.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I should talk to Kage.
Yeah, yeah, really nice guy, really fun, and just super well run caricature operations in Japan. So yeah, so I went out there in like the winter of 2003, 2004. I think it was right around New Year's actually, and worked out there for a couple weeks and met his artists and worked with them, and that was a great experience. So anyway, I'm not sure. Oh yeah, and then shortly after that, he would actually we had a long distance business relationship where he would send me artwork from his artists, like his top 5 artists. I don't know if he ran like a monthly competition, and they would submit their artwork to me, and I would give it like a critique. And at that time, I didn't do video or streaming. This is like early mid 2000s. But I would just do like a Photoshop, like I would just do a draw over, and then I would type some text on the actual image or off to the side and give it to them, and then they would have someone translate it to the artist. They didn't speak English, and say, yeah, you need to correct things here. It was a really cumbersome way of doing art reviews for people. But I think the fact that it was written down made it easier for some of them because they could read the translation rather than listening to a guy speak English if they're not comfortable with it. So I did that for a few years actually, and then just always saw Kage at conventions after that. And I went to Japan twice more after that. Once in 2007 and again in 2009 with my wife Debbie. She actually used to live in Japan, so she was a good person to go with and help show me around. But yeah, we went for caricature mini cons that Kage was throwing for a couple times, and that was a cool experience. So anyway, that's my experience with Kage. But yeah, he'd be good to talk to. But back to Chance's other questions about, it sounded like, if this is correct, he was interested in building his business in different directions, like a fine art or a studio aspect to it, but also still do retail. And how to grow at both. Was that right?
Yeah, there were a couple of questions. The first, that one was, it sounded like he felt like he was kind of being pulled in two directions, and he wasn't quite sure which way that he should like devote the energy to, and I think we kind of answered that a little bit earlier when we talked about that, because I had sort of the same question, which had to do with like the difference between the live drawing and like the more studio stuff, and you shared your experience about that.
Well, I would like to say that at this time, the pandemic and the world situation has really highlighted the fact that how important it is to be flexible and diverse and have different offerings in your business, because world circumstances could change, your personal circumstances could change, where you won't be able to do one of those things. And in my case, I am not able to do live events, which was my main moneymaker. We were doing really well with that. We're doing corporate trade shows and weddings and stuff, and all that's been canceled. And we're like kind of, I mean, not panicking, but we had really find ways to bring money in to just not have to dip into our savings. So the fact that I had a studio aspect and a digital aspect, working from home, like, but okay, we got to do that. So, but the fact that I can also do high-end work and paintings, commissions for people, that supplements my income when like the parties drop off. The fact that he does busking and live drawings in the streets, that's actually a little bit more financially stable than someone like me who works in events, because events have canceled. So if there are no events, I can't work. However, if I was comfortable going out on the street and doing it, that no one can stop you to do that, even during a pandemic. There are people right now here in San Diego doing that. They're going out on the street, Balboa Park, go to different touristy areas where there still are people. People are allowed to go outside. You can make money doing that still. So it's a good backup. You got to have backups. You got to have a contingency plan. It's good to be diverse and to have different offerings. So I wouldn't say he should definitely stop doing one thing in favor of another, but go where your passions are for sure. If you really want to be a painter or an illustrator or do commission work for people, find ways to devote time to that and build that aspect of your business up. There's no other secret to it other than just doing it. And if you don't have good samples in your portfolio, make them up. Do friends and family for free. Just to get work in your portfolio to show people the quality of your work, because you have to have a lot of good work to show people in order to get attention, to prove to them that you can do what you want to do. And you'll be learning in the process too. It's like free practice on a subject. If you want to do an oil painting or an acrylic painting and you don't do a lot of it, you got to practice. You got to practice your technique so that when you get those jobs, you're ready for them. So when opportunity knocks, you have to be able to answer that door and do it with your with all your ducks in a row. You got to get everything lined up and be ready to meet that opportunity when it greets you.
Yeah, I think that he might be a little bit confused or unsure about which direction he wants to go with it, or like which one he wants to spend his energy on. And I face that too. But I find that back to the fundamentals and taking classes is kind of quells that sort of worry, because you know, those fundamentals and courses that I'm taking can be applied whether I'm doing live caricature or if I'm doing studio work or if I'm doing client work. So I guess that's the only thing I have to say to that. Chance is an amazing artist, actually. He works in Dresden, and he found me on the streets of Prague busking, and that kind of helped to project him into his career in Dresden and get out of a job that he wasn't happy with and start working. And when I saw his caricatures for the first time, I'm like, wow, like why haven't you been doing this before? You're really good, you know. He was way better than me, and he hadn't drawn in 6 years, you know. So,
wow, yeah, you know, it's just every artist has to answer that for themselves, what they want to focus on or what direction they want to push in, because it's a very personal thing. It's not something I could tell you guys what, you know, I can't tell him what he thinks he should do. But whatever he gets most excited about in the morning, the legacy you want to leave behind, maybe, like that's a little bit how I view it. Is, you know, my quick sketches and my party sketches, they're kind of throwaways. You know, people will hold on to them for a little while. Maybe they'll use them as their online avatar. But if I want to leave like a legacy of my artistic footprint, you know, I got to do more durable works. I got to do paintings that are considered high end, because, you know, people are going to, you know, not remember my live quick sketches. That's just more for entertainment value.
yeah.
And I, you know, I'm a person who's not going to have kids in my life. I'm not going to leave that kind of legacy. So I prefer to leave my artistic footprint. I want to leave an impact in the art world somehow, and maybe inspire a few people if I can. And so that's what drives me. That went into my decision making for what type of artwork is that I wanted to do. But for other people, that may not matter at all. Maybe, you know, just earning a good living, supporting your family, maybe that's more important. And there are more financially beneficial ways to do that, you know, than trying to be a fine art caricature artist or a fine illustrator.
Yeah, it does come down to that's a great answer. I mean, that it does come down to what your perception of a legacy is, and it comes down to like what you want to leave behind and how important that is to you, or if it's more about the moment and the moments that you create for people. Yeah, it is really highly personal. I think that's a great answer.
Yeah, not to denigrate people that don't want to leave a lasting art legacy. That's totally fine. If you get a kick out of drawing people live, and that makes you truly happy, and it pays well, and you can support yourself and be comfortable, that's awesome. You know, you don't have to do anything that, you know, you've seen other artists doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Chance will make, I'm sure, I know Chance personally, I'm sure he'll make good studio work. I mean, he's really considerate guy, and I can see him spending, you know, 40 hours in the studio working on a painting.
Yeah, he has, I can tell, just great. He can construct the head really well. He knows how to shade it properly. They're have a really great graphic impact. Like visually look at it and you're like really struck by it. Like it's very, even the simplistically rendered ones are like very three-dimensional. So we can take that and build on that.
One thing that Chance shared with me with his experience in caricature was when he first started, I think he said for the first month, he was basically drawing straight lines and circles. Like every day he went into work, they gave him a piece of paper and a marker, and they gave him these exercises, straight lines, circles, spirals, and he just drilled that over and over and over. And he wasn't, you know, it wasn't until like week 3, I think, that he started practicing noses and then eyes. So I bring that up because, you know, I'm thinking of Alfred, you know, like maybe there's some kind of drill that he could apply to kind of drive that into his muscle memory to where he doesn't have to worry about if he's making that line straight or not. He can focus on other things.
Yeah, when I worked at SeaWorld, I took a cue from some of the better artists who would, when they sat down at their easel at the beginning of the day, they would just do some warm-ups. They would just do circle after circle, straight line after straight line, Z strokes, trying to get their calligraphy warmed up, their thin to thick lines. Then they would just do a page of noses if they have free time, just out of their imagination. They would just practice the technique. And you got to warm up. It's just like exercise. Warming up helps so much before doing a proper drawing or a proper painting. So that's, in a light drawing class, we'll do quick sketches really fast before doing the long drawing, and it just helps immensely. For quick sketch, it's a little bit of a different reason. Like you do it maybe more to get your calligraphy and your line quality up to snuff for the day. But yeah, it's a good habit to get into just before you do anything serious. Just practice your strokes, try to do perfect circles, try to do a perfect cylinder, and then try to shade. Then we get more advanced, try to shade in that cylinder, then shade in that circle and make it a sphere. And then before you know it, you'll be able to apply those techniques to complex shapes like noses and foreheads and chins. It's no different. It's just building up the confidence with the materials and getting your hands to move the right way with the right amount of pressure. And you do that by practicing on just basic geometric forms and simple lines.
Nice. So we have one more. Why don't we look at Tan May? He sent you the mermaid. Any advice on designing value structure? It's kind of a vague question, but
yeah, it seems very broad.
Maybe we could look at the mermaid piece and use that as an example.
Well, it sounds like maybe how the question might be, if I'm interpreting it right, how do you compose the values in a piece? Like how do you plan them out? And to me, values are one of the most important aspects to a composition in directing the viewer's eye in a proper painting. When you're doing a quick sketch caricature, that's not really a concern so much. But something like this, more than anything else, contrast draws the viewer's eyes to wherever you want the most important thing to be, the thing you want to focus on, the thing that has the most emotional resonance should be the area with the most contrast. So, for instance, the mermaid here, the thing that's most finely rendered is the face, has the most detail, the most crisp lines. And so, edge work and hard edges versus soft edges is another way to direct the viewer's eye. But contrast is super important. And I don't think he's taken advantage yet enough of the idea of contrast to plan the viewer's gaze. So maybe with that face, the face could be really light against a really dark background or really dark against a light background. Or maybe half the head will be in shadow and half will be in light. Right now, the values on the face are very, very softly rendered, like a very soft lighting. And it looks nice. There's a really nice atmosphere to it overall. And I don't think he necessarily needs to have super bright contrasting values to make it work. That's, it's not like a law or a rule, but it definitely can help. And there are ways to cheat the composition to do that. Say there's a spotlight. It almost seems like there's a very soft, diffuse spotlight and it's casting a bit of a shadow on the rock. Well, the part where the light is hitting the rock around the shadow of her head, it's like sort of a light greenish color. That could be a brighter value, and it would help focus the viewer's eye right there near the head, because that dark value of her hair would be set up against the light value of that rock. Because right now it looks like light is unnaturally intense on her face and arm, but not so much on the rock behind her. You could also use value to point to directions, like he does actually have a nice snaking S-curve of light value through the body, from the bottom of the body up to the top. But you can also continue that with the clouds in the background, or the waves in the water can also be, you can use S-curves and use values of the light sea foam breaking up in a way that points towards the area of interest. So all these things can be figured out in a thumbnail sketch. So where you basically just do a 2-value light and dark, no mid-tones or anything like that, just a 2-value concept sketch of the values about how you want to plan it out. And then maybe after that, you can do a 4 or 5-value revised version of that about how you might want to plan out the values. And if it works on a 2-inch high thumbnail with the values, if the forms are very clear, the silhouette of the figure is very clear, and it also has the most intense values at the place where you want the center of interest to be, then it's a good sketch, and then you can move forward. So it's a bit of planning, it's a bit of sketching ahead of time to plan those out. But that's how I might approach values in a painting like this.
Great answer. Yeah. So is there anything that you want to plug?
All I'm doing right now that's kind of new and cool is I'm doing my live streams. And it's on my Court Jones YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and plug in Court Jones. And I do them every Sunday at noon, local Pacific time. And that's, I think, Greenwich Mean Time, that's like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. over in Europe in England.
Yes.
And I know you're a little further ahead than that. I think you're 9 hours ahead of me.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock. That would be 8 o'clock Central European.
Gosh, I don't know. I also do have my new website up. I put it up a month or two ago. Finally redesigned my site. I had a site up for almost 20 years that was unchanged. And I built it myself finally, and I got an online store there where people can buy originals and prints directly from me.
Nice.
Yeah, and they can follow me on Instagram at Court Jones Artist, and on Facebook it's just called Court Jones Studio. I post everything new and all my news either on my Instagram or on Court Jones Studio or both. But I'd love to grow my YouTube channel as well and get more people to tune in live on Sundays when I do my live streams. I always advertise it too, like usually a day ahead of time. I'll tell people when exactly it is if I change the time.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for spending so much time with me.
Hey, yeah, I love talking about myself.
All right. Well.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. Have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.